Man, 3D platformers really are thriving nowadays. Which may sound strange to hear, as over the past few months, there's been several YouTube videos and social media posts popping up, claiming that the genre's doomed, that 3D platformers are dying out. And personally, I disagree. Now yes, it is true that the genre has become far less prominent in the AAA industry. There's the occasional exception here and there, but generally speaking, the AAA side of things doesn't have much interest in the genre anymore. Or at least, from the position of those who get a say on what gets made. That said, once you look past the AAA space, yeah, 3D platformers are practically going through a renaissance right now. There's been indie 3D platformers popping up all over the place the last few years. So much so that it's hard to keep track of them all. And believe me, I've been trying to. In my researching for this video, I found nearly 100 different indie 3D platformers, both already out and currently in development. And I'm almost certain that I missed some. From games that aim to be more direct spiritual successors, to games that aim to craft an entirely new experience. From games capturing that retro PS1 N64 look, to games that experiment with their art style, the 2D characters on a 3D environment style being a particularly popular one. Now, I've previously talked about some in video form, both in dedicated reviews and in my Games of the Year videos, but I was really feeling a desire to talk about some more. So, here I am now to do so. I'm gonna largely focus on ones I haven't talked about yet in videos, with one exception, but we'll get there when we get there. And I'll be covering both some that are already out, and some that are still in the works. Now with all that said and done, let's take a look at some indie 3D platformers. So to start things off, we've got ourselves a cute little adventure called Pilfer Story of Light. I was first introduced to this game a few months ago, oddly enough through an entirely different project from the same developer, Vincent Prom, or Log64 as he's known on social media. A friend of mine sent me a tweet about a scythe-based 3D action platformer that Vincent's currently working on, which there's not nearly enough action games out there made specifically around the scythe, so this immediately caught my attention. And when I went to look more into that project, I came across Vincent's pinned tweet about his previous game, that being Pilfer. It looked like a cute little game that had aimed to capture the feel of a very specific game of the past, a feeling only supported by Vincent's tweet noting that he wanted to remake that nostalgic feeling of first playing the Wii. So I picked it up and gave it a go, and I ended up having a pretty good time with it. It focuses on a raccoon named Pilfer, who lives a simple life in the world of the Great Forest with his troublemaking sister Poppy, until the two of them come in conflict with a team of dark animals, led by the foreboding but also kinda cool looking owl, Caligo. Caligo and his dark forces have been causing trouble across the Great Forest, and with the world having already dealt with an attempted dark corruption years prior, it's not an element of history many want repeated. So Pilfer, with the help of Poppy and a light spirit he befriends named Lumi, sets out to find magical spirit lanterns and use their power of light to put a stop to Caligo's plans. It's a straightforward story, but it works pretty well, particularly thanks to the game's efforts to get you invested in the world you're trying to save. You get to explore many regions of the Great Forest, each of which being inhabited by a variety of residents. And the game does a good job of emphasizing the connection these worlds have. For example, one world early on is a beehive factory that produces and distributes honey to the other areas. And you come across a bee delivering some honey in a later world. It's also helped by how, as you progress, characters from each world make their way to Crescent Island, a safe haven that serves as your hub area. Resisting the urge to make a Diddy Kong Racing joke. It's pretty simple in the grand scheme of things, but it helps make the Great Forest and its areas feel like places people actually live in, rather than just areas for you to platform through. On top of that, while the story seems pretty simple, you do get clues throughout that not all is as it may seem, such as through an interaction with one of Caligo's allies later on, and through these diary entries you unlock as you progress that can be found in Crescent Island's library, which reveal more lore about a specific character. Which on that note, let's address the main thing with this game. Pilfer's Story of Light makes it no secret that it is heavily inspired by the Super Mario Galaxy games, both in its presentation and story concepts, and in its gameplay and level mechanics. Several mechanics are lifted straight from Galaxy, from launchers to different parts of levels, to segments where you're pursued by shadowy duplicates that copy your every move, to platforms materializing in and out of existence. And I'm not saying these are all ideas that Mario Galaxy introduced and can't be done anywhere else, but in the way it uses many of its gameplay concepts, that comparison is inevitable. Which, yes, that was partly the point. Like I implied earlier, Vincent wanted to recreate the feeling of first playing Galaxy as a kid. I totally get that, and as I've gone over in the past, I'm all for games proudly wearing their inspirations on their sleeves. However, its reliance on being like Galaxy is perhaps a bit too prominent, and I can see why someone might write this game off for being too much like Galaxy. That said, if you are wanting to play a newer Galaxy-style game, Pilfer should scratch that itch pretty well. It's mechanically sound, with Pilfer being simple to get around, while also having more advanced movement for if you want to push yourself further. And it does incorporate those familiar level mechanics well, and as you progress further into the game, you do get more original ideas that also fit well with the level design and gameplay. Also, while it doesn't quite reach the same heights as Galaxy, it does do a pretty alright job at emulating that same atmospheric feel throughout, with special mention going to the Silken Caves and Aurora Mundus. Both of them capture that atmosphere pretty well in my opinion, Aurora Mundus especially. On top of that, this game's just cute. The main cast and the NPCs you meet throughout all have these simple and adorable designs, combined with charming dialogue interactions. Plus you've got plenty of alternate costumes to unlock for Pilfer, themed off the various worlds you visit. And it was always fun to go back and check on which outfit pieces I wanted to save up for next. And while the game does start on the easier side, it does show it's got itself some teeth as you get along, especially with the Hat in Time-esque challenge levels. That said, I will also note that I did have some technical issues here and there. But yeah, all things considered, I think Pilfer's a pretty good game. Again, perhaps a bit too on the nose regarding its Mario Galaxy inspiration, but for what it sets out to do, I think it does so well for the most part. If you want to give it a go yourself, it's currently available on Steam and itch.io. Don't know if Vincent's got any plan for a console port, but hey, guess we'll see. And with that, I eagerly await seeing more of that scythe-based platformer project that Vincent's cooking up. Though before we move on, I do want to note that this game does have one thing over Mario Galaxy. Pilfer doesn't have to worry about managing his air when underwater. What do you gotta say about that, plumber boy? Next up, we're going back a couple generations when it comes to inspiration, because here we have the very N64 and PS1 era inspired Frogun. Now, unlike with Pilfer, this one I've actually had on my radar for a few years now. I first heard about it via Hub World, a Nintendo Direct style showcase for indie 3D platformers that happened a few years back, and Frogun was one of the standout titles for me, so much so that I bought it on my Switch around the time it came out back in 2022. Only to never finish the game and let it join the backlog pile. So let's go ahead and fix that now. Frogun centers on Renata Hops, the daughter of renowned archaeologists and inventors, Drs. Todd and Lily Hops. She usually tags along with them on their adventures, but for their latest expedition into the Beelzebub ruins, she's told to stay behind for her safety. But after waiting a couple days, Renata starts to worry that something must have happened to her parents, and heads into the ruins to save them, taking her parents' invention, the Frogun, with her. And sure enough, as you traverse the ruins, you find various notes from Todd and Lily, gradually revealing that something did indeed happen to them. Seems like Renata's got a very strong sense of intuition. But yeah, that's your goal for the game. Make your way through the Beelzebub ruins and find and save Renata's parents. And fortunately, you're not alone on this quest. You've got the Frogun, who will not only provide tips and remarks throughout your journey, but will be your main means of getting through these tricky levels. Aside from walking and a simple jump, the Frogun's grappling hook-like tongue is all you've got to work with moveset-wise, allowing you to pull yourself towards walls and objects, or grab objects and enemies and pull them towards you. It's a very simple mechanic on paper, but Frogun does a lot with this hook, with several of the game's puzzles and platform challenges being made around efficient use of it. Now I will note that compared to many other 3D platformer characters, Renata's general movement is on the slower side, which I thought could end up feeling irritating, but the level design accommodates this pace pretty well for the most part. Even in the levels where you have to race Jake, a treasure hunter with a grapple hook snake, the levels are designed well around your slower movement even in that more competitive context. Which on that note, the level design in Frogun interestingly reminds me of all things, Bomberman 64, which isn't even a full-on platformer. But like, the sort of rudimentary level design structure this game has felt similar to what you'd see in Bomberman 64, even though the two games aren't all that alike otherwise. Which, funny enough, the game's developer Molgado confirmed he hadn't played Bomberman 64, so this really is just a funny coincidence. Now while the goal of each level is simply to get to the end, each level has more to it than just that. The level end emblem has multiple pieces to it that you can only get from completing certain tasks in the level. Namely, finding the 2 emerald eyes, finding the level's hidden note, sometimes from Todd and Lily, but sometimes written by someone else, finding the obsidian skull in the level's hidden challenge area, collecting every coin in the level, beating the level without dying, and beating the level in a certain time, with an additional bonus piece for beating the level in an especially fast time. Getting these emblems completed aren't required for level progression, but you will get special goodies along the way, such as new hats and health upgrades, in chests that will require emblems to unlock. So it may be worth going for completion on at least some of the levels. And very fortunately, you're not required to get all of an emblem's pieces in one go. So what I would often do is go through a level and get all the collectibles on my first go, and then, now knowing the level's layout, go through it again as quick as possible without dying to get the time trial and no death pieces. But again, that's just if you want the complete emblems. If you just want to play through without worrying about that, the game isn't going to hold you back for doing so. Though it is nice to have extra hits, especially when going up against the bosses. Not that they're brutally hard, but it's nice to have more wiggle room to learn their attack patterns. Now I will say, the game does have some issues here and there. While the slower pace is mostly fine, it can be pretty irritating when you find you've missed a coin and you gotta backtrack through the level to find it, which happened a few times for me. There is also a fair bit of jank at points. Some gimmicks can be rather finicky, and while the camera's mostly fine, there were a few points where it really wasn't. The game will get on the harder side, and some of those deaths may not entirely feel like your fault, which can make completing deathless runs kinda frustrating at points. But overall, I had a fun time with Frogun. If you want to try it out, it's on Steam, GOG.com, and all major consoles. Quick note though, the Switch version, which is the version I have, runs at 30 FPS, while every other version has it at 60 FPS. I didn't personally have an issue with playing at the lower frame rate, but I felt I should note that regardless. Though before I wrap up with Frogun, I did also want to quickly note about the game's upcoming sequel. Yep, Elgato's currently developing a second Frogun game, Frogun Encore, which is actually coming out later this month. Going off what's been shared so far, it's looking to have an expanded moveset, a wider world to explore for the adventure, and local co-op, with player 2 playing as Jake. So yeah, Frogun's becoming a full franchise now. You'll love to see it. Alright, before I start this next segment, I'm gonna give a quick epilepsy warning for the game I'm gonna be talking about. This game's got a lot going on visually, particularly with bright colors and flashing lights. So if you at all deal with epilepsy or photosensitivity, it might be best to skip this segment. Just wanted to clarify that now before we get into this game, just to be safe. With that said, let's talk about an indie 3D platformer I've been eager to talk about. A much more recent title called Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom. This one I first heard about earlier this year, not long before it came out, and it looked absolutely bonkers to say the least. And after seeing a mutual sing its praises a few times on social media, I decided to play it myself, and I am so glad that I did. This is one of the most bizarre and mechanically unique 3D platformers I've played in quite some time, and I'm excited to show it off to you all. So you play as a wind-up yellow taxi, created by a mechanic named Mario. And before anyone makes a Mario joke, the game beat you to it. But why a wind-up car, you may ask? Well, because the islands that Mario and many others call home have been invaded by an evil tech corporation that's using the energy of strange green gears to corrupt all the oil and make everyone's cars go evil. Fortunately, as a wind-up car, you don't need oil to function. So it's up to you to find the green gears across the islands and put a stop to the evil tech corporation's plans. Which, by the way, the evil tech corporation is called Tozla, and the head of it is named Alien Mosk. There's many words you can use to describe this game, and subtle is not one of them. But yeah, Yellow Taxi is a collectathon, with the green gears being what you need to unlock new levels and progress. But you're gonna be getting these in a far less conventional manner, primarily because of the game's main selling point. There's no jump button. Technically, there is a means to jump, but it is far from the traditional sense. Here, let me explain. So you start off with simple driving mechanics, which do feel good, but in the first level, you'll unlock a dash ability. You do a little wind-up animation, and then you launch forwards. However, what you later learn is that if you press the dash button again during the wind-up animation, you cancel the dash and get tossed upwards a bit. This is the closest you have to a jump in this game, and you're gonna be using it a lot. But it doesn't stop there, because the utility of the moveset only increases despite what it may seem. For example, if you use the brake button to cancel the dash, you'll get flung higher, but backwards. And even this can be altered if you tilt left and right as you press brake, flinging you in whatever direction you're tilting. And this is all before mentioning how while in midair, you can still use the dash, or even better, dash cancel a second time. So you'll find yourself doing these crazy combos of dashes and dash cancels to get around in the air. And the number of places you're able to get with these seemingly simple inputs is kinda nuts. And that's on top of there being a super dash you can use if you start accelerating again just as the dash forward starts, which you can use to really send yourself flying. This is one of the most unconventional but mechanically sound movesets I've ever used in a 3D platformer. And it was always a ton of fun seeing what kind of crazy maneuvers I was able to pull off in the right place. And the level design brilliantly encourages this kind of experimentation, with many collectibles being available in hard to reach places, but not necessarily with one solution to get there. Like, there were these two green gears at the top of the main hub area, one on top of a lighthouse and the other up in the clouds above. Now the game places a propeller power-up you unlock later at this spot, but with the right moves, you are absolutely able to get both of these gears long before you unlock the propeller. And that's just one example out of many. However, bizarro platforming is not all you're going to be doing throughout this game. You are a taxi for a reason. Some of the levels are a mix of Collectathon and Crazy Taxi, having you pick up and drop off NPCs at different parts of the level to earn both coins and green gears. And these levels are on a time limit, which picking up NPCs will help extend the time, so there's incentive to help these NPCs out while collecting everything. Or you can just send NPCs flying by driving into them, that works too. If you couldn't tell, there's a lot to this game, and it really doesn't slam on the brakes for most of its runtime. The only parts of the game I personally wasn't huge on were two specific levels. First was the Tosla office building, where the game puts you in a top-down perspective, which changes the control scheme, and has you doing a stealth section where getting caught sends you back to the checkpoint. I get that they wanted to change things up a bit, but I honestly don't feel like this really leans into the game's strengths. The other was a later Crazy Taxi level where you're getting blasted at by an insta-kill laser every few seconds. The insta-kill laser just got kind of annoying to deal with. But those aside, I had an absolute blast with Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom. It's currently only available on Steam, with no confirmed plans for console ports, but I feel like this is the kind of game that would really benefit from being on Switch. Hopefully the devs agree on that one. But yeah, Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom is easily gonna be high on my Games of 2024 list. I absolutely loved this one. Okay, so remember how I said at the start that there was going to be one game I'd be talking about that I've already covered before? Well, we're at that point now, because we're going to be taking a quick detour back to Super Kiwi 64. For those unaware, this is one of the latest games from Scythe-based, one of my personal favorite indie devs. He's been cooking up a ton of bite-sized indie game experiences over the past decade, primarily in the 3D platformer genre. These include the original Kiwi 64, McBat 64, Toree 3D and Toree 2, and, well, Super Kiwi 64. Now, I did enjoy my time with Super Kiwi 64, with its visually well-crafted environments, Kiwi's fun-to-use moveset, and plenty of fun secrets to mess around with. But I will admit that by the end, I was wanting a bit more. Like, yeah, all his games tend to be really small, but I don't know, something about this one felt like it could use a touch more to make the experience stronger. Well, fortunately, we got just that. Early on in the year, Scythe released an update for the game known as Super Kiwi 64 Doomsday, which adds extra content to the main game as well as a new side story. In the case of the former, we get some cutscenes to help provide story context, probably for those who didn't play Beanie and thus aren't caught up with the Scythe lore, and the addition of time trials for all the levels, which add a fun extra challenge, especially with how tight the window of success is. You really gotta master Kiwi's moveset to pull a lot of these off. I won't spoil what the reward is for beating them all, but it's a nice little treat too. But the Doomsday side story is the main star of the update, focusing on the return of Melon King, a villain from a few of the past Scythe games, and his new universe-threatening schemes. And this time, he's also got voice acting.
Allow me to introduce myself. They call me Melon King, former ruler of countries, future destroyer of realities.
In order to stop him and save good old McBat in the process, oh yeah, McBat's in this game too, you'll find yourself exploring a couple of new expansive levels for collectibles before taking the fight to Melon King. And while the two new main levels are pretty neat, it's that final level where the side story shines best. With some really sick music, getting to team up with McBat and how you traverse the level, and even a full-on boss fight against Melon King. It's a short and simple, but fun add-on that, in my opinion, gives Super Kiwi 64 that touch more that makes the experience stronger. So thank you for including this, Scythe. Oh, actually, while on the topic of Scythe, he's got a new Toree game set to come out this year, Toree Saturn. There's a demo for it on Steam currently. Check it out. So now we come to the part of the video where we focus on some upcoming indie 3D platformers. There's a whole bunch of them currently in the works, but for this video, I'm just gonna focus on a handful of them, specifically ones that currently have playable demos. And we're gonna start with one that I came across pretty recently called PaperKlay. What we have here is a classic collectathon game, focusing on these two birds named Chick and Nugget as they search for lost eggs, the main collectible of the game. However, the catch is in the world in which they'll find these eggs. PaperKlay's world is formed from a variety of materials: paper, cardboard, buckets, books, fabrics, and so on. And it's not just for aesthetic either. As shown in trailers, you're able to interact with the world in many crafty ways, such as rotating or unfolding parts of the environment. But even just aesthetically, this visual style opens so many possibilities for creativity, something that the developer, Kevin Anderson, is looking to be capturing pretty well so far. The demo I played only had one level, but it was a nice taste of what to expect. Chick feels good to control, with stuff like a double jump, a spin attack, a glide, and a ground pound. Oh, and also a balk button. The level itself was pretty simple, but it had its standout elements, such as watching the background reveal itself in a stop-motion-y kind of manner, as well as meeting this interesting frog fellow.
Hey, looky here! Are you walking on my tongue?
What's that now?
Don't mind me, just step right in. It's cozy inside.
You sure about this, Chick?
He does seem friendly enough.
Though on the stop-motion-y point, that's also something the game's leaning into. Some objects and animations have intentionally lower frame rates to emulate that stop-motion style. And personally, I kinda dig it. But to those who don't, you are able to turn this off in the options, which I think was a good addition. But yeah, while just a small bite of what to expect, this is looking pretty neat so far. The aesthetic is great, it's fun to control, and it's looking to take strong advantage of its main hook. PaperKlay is currently slated to come out in mid-2025, no word on what platforms yet aside from Steam as far as I'm aware. But in the meantime, the demo's available on Steam if you want to give it a try yourself, which trust me, it's worth it for that balk button. While on the topic of platformers themed around craft materials, the next game we've got here is Warrior Spirit, courtesy of developer Maykeys. This one's demo was actually pretty new, and was brought to my attention by the developer themselves. Gotta say, pretty good timing on your part, Maykeys. Going off what's been released, the game has you playing as the titular Warrior Spirit, a little guy created to help fight off a horde of evil clay monsters that have overrun the land. And you've got plenty of tools at your disposal to deal with this threat. The main gameplay hook is the use of multiple magic arms. 3 of them give you specific types of attacks, namely a red sword, a yellow hammer, and a blue lance, with some enemies being color-coded to specific weapons. Though instead of just being red weapon beats red enemies, blue weapon beats blue enemies, yellow weapon beats yellow enemies, the game actually uses opposite colors for color coding. So in this case, the red weapon beats green enemies, the blue weapon beats orange enemies, and the yellow weapon beats purple enemies. It's functionally the same, but I think it's a neat attention to detail. But you're gonna get the most use out of the regular white arm, which can be used to push yourself upwards for a high jump, grab onto poles to swing off of, or to grab clay items that form after certain enemies are defeated. These include a green bouncy ball that increase the height of your high jump, an orange ring to grab onto hooks with, and a purple disc to throw either as a projectile or as a makeshift platform. The game's also got a dash system with these wheels Warrior Spirit has, which allow you to glide across water, go up walls if you have enough speed, and even slide across walls if you go at the right angle. And it's quite fun to use. Heck, Warrior Spirit's moveset in general is pretty fun to use, even if the movement can be a bit slippery. The demo has 3 levels, one being a tutorial and the other 2 being a taste of what to expect out of the game's structure. The first was more of a puzzle platformer kind of level, figuring out how to unlock these spiked doors, and the second was a vertical climb sort of level, utilizing both the hook ring and the bouncy ball. Both levels were on the relatively short side, but both had a decent enough sense of challenge that I feel it worked. Having these checkpoints that also allow you to bake items or health with the coins you've been collecting is a nice touch too, giving you that safety net in the off chance you lose an important item. The game's aiming for more of an of-all-ages target audience, rather than specifically going for hardcore platformer players. And in that regard, I think it's on the right track. Now there is room for polish in this, and I will admit that I'm not huge on the way the magic arms look, just kind of floating behind Warrior Spirit's head. But all in all, this does show promise. The demo's available on Steam if you want to give it a go yourself, and the game's gonna be making its way to Kickstarter in the future if you want to support it. Best of luck with that campaign, Maykeys. And now we come to the final game of this video. And would you look at that? It's a Sonic-inspired indie platformer. Man, there's been quite a few of those lately, hasn't there? I guess with an icon as prominent and long-lasting as Sonic, and the massive fanbase it has, it only makes sense that we'd get some indie titles partly inspired by his adventures. And that includes in the 3D space. Of course, we got stuff like Spark the Electric Jester, which I've gone on about on multiple occasions, but the one I wanted to focus on for this segment is one I'm very excited for. Rollin Rascal. This one I'm sure several of you are familiar with, given its recent successful Kickstarter campaign, but I really wanted to talk about this one because, man, I'm hyped for it. Going off what's been released so far, Rollin Rascal focuses on, well, Rascal, a mischievous speedster who hungers for adventure, but also his tech-savvy sister QT, who seeks to find out more about her and her brother's long-lost ancestors, and their conflict with the self-made cyborg Elegance, who plots to reshape the world the way she sees fit. A simple enough premise, but if other Sonic-inspired indie platformers are anything to go off of, it could go quite a long way with a seemingly simple story. But we'll see what the plot holds when the game's out. So let's focus on what we've got in the demo they released with the Kickstarter campaign. Rollin Rascal is going for that open-ended, multiple routes kind of design with its levels, allowing for a lot of ways to get from point A to point B, which going off the level they have in the demo is already showing to be effectively executed, helped by how much fun Rascal is to control, being perfectly manageable even at top speeds, but still with a skill ceiling present for if you want to go crazy with what he can do. This is especially apparent in those race challenge levels the demo's got, which you're even able to compete in with others online. But the game's unique hook comes in the ability to hijack enemies and use their abilities to your own advantage. We've only gotten a taste of that mechanic so far, but I can definitely see the potential in this. On top of that, I am loving the art for this game. The character designs are looking superb, and the animation work with these designs is top-notch so far. Like, this game's not even out yet, and Rascal's already up there as one of my favorite character designs for a 3D platformer protagonist. I just love the way he looks and moves about, it's so good. Which on that note, not only are you able to dress him up, but you're also able to customize his color palette. I originally gave him the Canada flag color scheme, but then I decided to go a different direction. To the surprise of absolutely no one. Now, given this game's Kickstarter campaign wrapped up just a few months ago, we've probably still got a while to go before this game's out. The estimated delivery date given on Kickstarter is July 2026, but I suspect it'll take longer than that, which is pretty usual for Kickstarter games. But I'm very excited to see future updates for this game, because everything I've seen and tried so far, I have been loving. They've also gone on record saying that this game's planned to simply be the first chapter of the Rollin Rascal saga, which on one hand, I know there's a risk in planning to make a series before your first entry's proven to be a success, but on the other hand, I'm totally down for more indie 3D platformers becoming full franchises. Heck, in general, I'm just really excited to see more indie 3D platformers emerging from all over the place. And everything I've shown today is just scratching the surface. Seriously, you have no idea how tempting it was to just overbloat this video with a ton more games, but I'll restrain myself. Though yeah, like I said at the start, the 3D platformer scene is thriving right now, even though a bunch of the genre's staple franchises are inactive nowadays. And like, don't get me wrong, it's nice when a classic platformer IP does make a comeback, but the genre is a lot more than just those classic icons, and them being dormant doesn't mean the genre is dead. Sure, you may have to dig a bit more to find new ones, but that doesn't change the fact that they exist and are worth giving that same attention we'd give to those older IPs. So instead of lamenting the state of the genre just because the franchises we're nostalgic for aren't getting new games, I feel we could put that passion and support for the genre into the 3D platformers we are getting. Maybe even help some of those become modern classics. And I know this may all sound rich coming from someone whose childhood favorite platformer did make a brief comeback, but I'll be real, I'm at a point that I'd probably still feel this way even if the Crash revival didn't happen. Because like I said, the genre's a lot more than just those classic icons. With all that said, this has been BenjaMage, thank you all for watching, and until the next video, have a nice day everybody.